Now, this is 1961, the height of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and to think that a country that was equidistant or non-aligned between the Soviet Union and the United States had the cheek to call itself the closest approximation to the free world, and this appellation coming from a naturalized Indian, J.B.S. Haldane, was something that was stuck in the gulls of Haldane's scientific colleagues, one of whom, a professor of biology at the University of California, Berkeley, wrote to Haldane saying, "You call India the closest approximation to the free world, but my impression is that India has its fair share of scoundrels and a tremendous amount of poor, unthinking and disgustingly subservient individuals who are not attractive." To this chastisement by a scientific colleague, Haldane replied, "Perhaps one is freer to be a scoundrel in India than elsewhere. The disgusting subservience of the others has its limits. The people of India, people of Calcutta, because Haldane then lived in Calcutta, the people of Calcutta riot, upset trams, and refuse to obey police regulations in a manner which would have delighted Jefferson. I don't think their activities are very efficient, but that is not the question at issue." Now, these are two comments from unpublished letters of Haldane, written in the late 50s and early 60s, which to me still capture, with the economy and wit of a polymathic sort of insider-outsider figure, what the Indian political experiment is all about. It is extraordinary. It is in its scale, in its ambition, in its recklessness. So when you come to hear the words of criticism and chastisement that you're going to hear from me, I'd like you to keep in mind that they come from someone who is an Indian patriot, who is a citizen of India, not a citizen of the world, and who speaks his mind freely in his own country, who thinks that the Indian experiment of unity with diversity and democracy despite poverty was unprecedented, was founded on a quite distinctive and special set of characteristics. National experiments throughout the modern world have generally involved the people of a certain circumscribed territory coming together under a common flag, speaking the same language, adhering to the same faith, and having a common enemy. There are many examples across the world. I mean, to be Polish historically meant you were a member of the Catholic Church, you spoke the Polish language, and you detested either Germany or Russia, depending on which big power was persecuting you at that time. And that's true of, for example, India's neighbor Pakistan. To be Pakistani means that Urdu historically was the language of Urdu was meant to unite you. You were founded as a Muslim homeland, and you detested India. But the extraordinary thing about the Indian national experiment was that it did not privilege a single language, it did not privilege a single religion, and indeed, it was founded on opposition to the empire, but in many ways, respect and admiration for the British. I mean, I've said this before, and I'd like to say it again, that in the history of relations between empires and colonies, the relationship between India and Britain is unique. Never before has a relationship been so harmonious. I mean, think of the French and the Algerians and the Indonesians and the Dutch and the Belgians and the Congolese and the Americans and the Vietnamese, and you get a sense of, how special this relationship is. It's quite extraordinary that Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of the Indian freedom struggle, counted as his closest friend throughout the period he was fighting for India's independence. He counted as his closest friend an English Anglican priest called Charles Freer Andrews. So the Indian experiment is quite special, and it continues to be quite special. But because of its scale, its ambition, its recklessness, it's also flawed, it's unfulfilled, it's in the process of making. and it's facing a series of challenges. And I'm going to list before you what I see as the 10 major challenges that the Republic of India faces today. They're in not necessarily in order of importance, and I wouldn't like to, I could, when if pushed to it, rank them in order of importance, but I think these are all serious and major challenges that the Republic of India faces, that the Indian political experiment faces. And I'm going to begin with a challenge that has been much in the news in India over the last several weeks, but is rather unrecognized outside. And that's the challenge of a left-wing Maoist insurgency in the heart of India. I live in Bangalore, which when I was growing up there in the 1960s was a charming cantonment town with a glorious Mediterranean climate and tree-lined avenues and parks, and known as the pensioners' paradise. And little did I think when I was growing up in Bangalore in the 1960s and 70s that a time would come when my hometown would be invoked in pejorative terms in an American presidential election, when democratic political candidates would talk about, warn darkly about jobs being Bangalored. So Bangalore is, as you know, a kind of a metaphor for India's rising economy. It's the showpiece of its information technology industry. Dr. Hepburn mentioned the back office of the world, and Bangalore has pretensions to being the back office of the world. So Bangalore is the economic showpiece of India. Delhi is the political capital. It's a place, as David Malone well knows, of great charm and architectural attraction. It's home to possibly the most creative minds in India, the most influential and productive thinkers, writers, artists, not scientists, but thinkers, writers, artists live in Delhi. It's the center of our media, our publishing house, and it's also a city that has very eagerly embraced this idea that India is about to achieve superstardom. There's a great amount of self-congratulation among Delhi's elite. And there's also a fair amount of self-congratulation among Bangalore's elite, which is a business elite as contrasted to Delhi's political elite. Now, if you fly from the political capital of India to the economic showpiece of India, a journey that takes about 2 hours and 20 minutes, about half the time it took me to fly from Toronto to Vancouver today, but unlike the journey I took today, if you were to fly from Delhi to Bangalore, 35,000 feet below you on the ground, hidden from your eyes, hidden from the eyes of the Western media, hidden from the eyes of even the upmarket Indian media and the growing middle class, is a brutal civil war being played out between the forces of the Indian state and Maoist insurgents. This Maoist insurgency, which originated in the late 60s, has experienced various ups and downs, has really consolidated itself in the last 5 or 6 years when the major factions united. You know, there's a famous old joke about Trotskyists, a variety of Marxists, and that joke goes, one Trotskyist is a branch, 2 Trotskyists are a party, 3 Trotskyists are a split. And the Indian Maoists, for much of their existence, were notoriously sectarian and disputatious. I mean, when I was a student in Calcutta in the early 1980s, there were 18 Maoist factions, all quarreling with each other about all kinds of arcane things. You know, there was the anti-Lin Peng, pro-Mao Zedong, anti-Chow Enlai, pro-cultural revolution faction, and so and various kinds of permutations. And the most disputatious and sectarian faction of them all called itself, in true Orwellian style, party unity. I mean, it was the most abusive of all the factions. And I used to laugh and I used to have fun. And I wrote a kind of jokey essay based on my years in Calcutta in the 1980s, called An Anthropologist Among the Marxists, which is sort of about how I was an anthropologist studying this tribe with its peculiar rituals and hunting practices and human sacrifices and so on. but it is no longer a joking matter.